Okay, welcome. Why don't we go ahead and get started? I want to be mindful of the time and respectful of where everyone is and what they're doing today. I wanted to, one, make sure that everyone is in the right place. You're in self-care, self-development. I see some nodding heads. Okay, we're all in the same place. So just to provide just a bit of an overview for this online session, I want to just do kind of a little bit of an overview of the class and the syllabus. And prior to that, some brief introductions. I think this is a very unique class. And so I'm always curious about what brings you to self-care and self-development, what brings you to chaplaincy or spiritual advising, because it helps give me really a window into really your learning objectives and how you think this course might be beneficial. And then we'll leave some time for just questions that you may have. Hopefully I'll be able to answer them, and then what you can expect when we meet for the week in July. So any questions about that? If everyone is aware, there's also the kind of the chat box on the side. So if you do have a question and you want to throw it in there, that's absolutely fine as well. And so if there are no questions, we will get started. So again, welcome. This is Self-Care and Self-Development for Band Claremont. My name is Kameelah Rashad. This is my second year teaching this course, and I really, really enjoy it. I've enjoyed even just sort of collecting, being thoughtful about the materials that we read and discuss, and being able to see how, you know, just the various and very unique perspectives that all of the students bring to this subject. It tends to be a course where there has been some self-reflection, you know, some awareness around personal needs and how who you are definitely is reflected in what you do. And so it's exciting for me as an instructor to also learn from you as students. So I'm hoping that we can begin to build a dialogue so that the learning is reciprocal, right? That you can learn from me, but you can also learn from each other, and I certainly learn from you as well. So just a bit of background about me and what I do. I have a master's in psychological services and education, as well as restorative practices and youth counseling. I'm also completing my doctorate in clinical psychology. Currently, this is my last year. So I take all prayers and encouragement and affirmations for dissertation writing. I'm completing that in the next couple weeks. And so my focus within clinical psychology is couple and family, and really thinking about my orientation is psychodynamic and family systems. And I draw heavily from narrative work. So essentially, for me, what that means is being curious about our patterns of relationships and connections and attachment within our family systems and communities, contexts, as well as thinking about how we begin to intentionally develop a narrative, sort of a positive, hopeful narrative about who we are, right, in the world. And so I bring sort of that lens to my teaching, my community activism, and definitely what I do as far as my work as a therapist. And so I guess the last thing that I think it's important to mention is that I'm the founder and president of Muslim Wellness Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that really focuses on promoting healing and well-being in the American Muslim community. And well-being for us includes paying attention to impact of oppression and discrimination, marginalization in our community, and how it really impacts health holistically. And so we talk a lot and organize around anti-Muslim bigotry, anti-Black racism, and also the impact of sort of xenophobia, immigration, refugee status, so around citizenship, as well as poverty and kind of social and economic concerns. And so we try to take a very broad view of those things that contribute to well-being, so that we ensure that the folks that we are in conversation with feel like they're being seen as a whole person in that work. So that's a bit about me. I think the last thing that I will mention is that within one of the initiatives within Muslim Wellness Foundation is the Black Muslim Psychology Conference. We're in the 5th year of that conference. And again, it focuses very specifically on the unique needs and concerns of Black Muslims who contend with both anti-Muslim bigotry and anti-Black racism in kind of the broader community, but also the anti-Black racism that's present within the faith community. And so we're thinking about those who are descendant of enslaved Africans, but also those who, trace their heritage and their lineage back to the continent or the Caribbean. Those who are descendant of Africans, Afro-Caribbean, Afro-Latino. And so we have made this sort of intentional space so that we can talk about those intersections and how they impact people's lives. So now what I'd like to do is kind of open the forum. I would love to hear from each of you, and this can be very brief. You don't have to prepare a speech or anything, but just so that we can become more familiar with one another and kind of what brings us to this moment in time together, right? I am a firm believer that there are no coincidences, and so if we are all together for this particular reason, then I am hopeful that that it is also intentional and purposeful about how we spend this time together. And so I'm actually going to start from like my screen. So if I just kind of wave at you, it's not to call you out, but I know there's a tendency when we're on like conference calls that there's silence because people don't know when to jump in or how, and then we crosstalk. So to kind of minimize the potential for that, I'll just call you by name if that's okay. So I'm going to start to my right with Celia. If you could just say your name and a bit about who you are and what brings you to this class.
Good afternoon. How are you, Professor and all the fellow learners, I guess. I'm on the West Coast. I'm in Southern California in a little town called Laguna Niguel. And I could guarantee you I'm the oldest of this class. I have been a consultant and coach for over 30 years now. So most of my work is Fortune 500 companies, and I train authentic leadership. And I do a lot of diversity work. So social activism inside a business system is very important to me. And in 2016, I was fading away thinking I was going to retire because basically I'm actually going to be 70 years old next year. So, but 2016 election happened. And so all of a sudden I realized that I had one more thing I got to do. I can't quit yet, and I had to make sure my voice is out there. So I'm expanding some of the same work I'm doing, but a much larger. And I wanted to really look at moral injury is one of those specific things that I want to do. It's not just for the military. It actually is about our human race and how do we decide to go to war, and which is totally. And it's fascinating because I'm not religious, so I'm a Unitarian. Okay, so if you ask any Unitarian, they would tell you the last thing they want to say is their religion. They're not religion. They just believe in the interconnectedness of all human beings. So if we are our brother's keeper, so how can we go to war? So that's the premise that I enter. I also a clinical psychology background, but I also have business background. So I'm a first-year student at University of the West, which is a Buddhist school. And so I'm constantly arguing with the professors. So, because, hey, I'm an old person, I can do this. So, and I really appreciate this course that Claremont is allowing us from University of the West to participate in the summertime. And this course is obviously very important, especially around self-care. I mean, there are times when being a social activist, we tend to overspend ourselves, and then we became totally ineffective. So, but thank you so much for giving me the opportunity.
Thank you so much. And I look forward to learning more from you around those interests, particularly related to authentic leadership and your experiences. I think my elders tell me that one of the joys of getting older is being able to just say, you know what, I've censored myself for many years and now I refuse to do that. So I appreciate that awareness and that reflection, and hope that we can all benefit from what you have to share. So I'm actually going to go, I guess, clockwise. And so for me, that's Ubaid.
Hello. Hello, everyone. My name is Ubaid Ekiji. I am currently in New Jersey. We moved to New Jersey about 3 weeks ago from Omaha, Nebraska. I am the second year for Masters of Divinity at Bayan Claremont. How did I get into this program? Of course, it is about I served in and participated in business world for a while, and I was an HR profession in West Coast in California last year, and I worked for a company about five years. And while I was doing that, I served in California State Prison as volunteer chaplain. While I was doing that, I really enjoyed what I was doing, and that led me to meet Professor Özgür Koca at Bayan, and then he kind of suggested and recommended to take classes from Bayan Claremont, and that's how I started. And then since then, I'm a student at Bayan. And last year, I kind of took break. Actually, I quit first from that company I was working in California, and I went to Omaha for my CP education, clinical pastoral education. I took 10 months of residency and chaplain residency in a Creighton University Medical Center, trauma hospital. And about a couple months ago, this company, the one I worked in California, they called me and then they asked me if I can take care of their finance controller position in their headquarters in New Jersey. And then, of course, so many things to decide, and I'm still a student, and because of financial reasons, because of not having enough or big Muslim community in Omaha, or not having a job opportunities, all that, we added many reasons altogether, and then I accepted this position in a with a catch that I told the company I will be taking care of their finance, but I will be taking my classes, I will be arranging my own time, I will be going to and serving hospitals and prisons. And if you guys agree with all that stuff, and I will be helping you. And then they agreed on that, and now I'm controlling my own hours and whatever I want. And I did not start volunteer services yet in prisons or hospitals, but I am in touch with a couple of people who's actually going to prison. So inshallah, I will be starting on that. So that's what I am doing at the moment. Inshallah. Yeah. And why this class? Number one, it's a requirement for chaplains. Number two, self-care is very important, especially in the clinical pastoral education during our CP unit. That was one of the main learning goals for me and for our groups, that we were constantly reflecting on to how to take care of yourself in order to take care of others. So I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, well, thank you. It sounds like you were surprised that they agreed to all your stipulations. And so you had to say, oh, I guess I'm moving to New Jersey. But welcome, it's good to have you.
Thank you.
Naimat, Shahid just joined the call, and just to kind of get you up to speed, we're just doing just very brief intros, writing your name, a bit about your background and what brings you to this class. So you're actually next in the rotation.
Alhamdulillah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam.
I got a bit confused. I was thinking for later, and my mind kept saying, no, it's time. So pardon my tardiness. I'm Naimat Shahid, and I live in the Bay Area, California area, working in public education for about going into the 15th year now. Presently working as a restorative justice practitioner for one of our schools in what we call Deep East Oakland, a high trauma crime area. I've been in education for more than 40 years in different capacities, both public, private, and charter. Second year of the MDiv program at Bayan under the Muhammad Ali Scholarship. I was blessed to one of the instructors introduced me to someone at Claremont that opened the door for me to participate in a fellowship program with Columbia on looking at restorative collaborative practice or spiritual collaborative practices. Self-care has always been a weakness for me. And I, of course, we have to take it as a part of the requirement, but it's also been a weakness for me based on some of my having to work so hard as a child into adulthood. So it's a tendency, the impulse to always get things done. And when there's a quiet moment, that moment needs to be occupied with something to do. So, and then the times we live in now, we're always pressured by either the calendar that we work by or the religious responsibilities that we have or demands from our family, and then whatever else may crop up during the day. So it's constant. And though I've studied it, and see, even the language I use, I've studied self-care. So what I need to do is learn how to practice it and be okay with having some quiet moments. Being okay with taking a vacation and not having to read or study or prepare for something. And that I'm looking forward to and hoping to move out of the ideas of what self-care is into a greater practice. And I'll just end by saying this. While at home, I'm really good with my essential oils, the aromatherapy. I'm really good about, what I eat, the time that I'm eating. But it's more so the impulse to do and the sort of the pressure to get things done that is troubling. And I'm hoping that I can balance that out. And then I can be a greater service to others and won't be tired or drained through trying to serve and work with others.
Well, there were many nodding heads as you described kind of what your struggle is, and I think that resonates with many of us, myself included. And that's definitely part of our discussion for the week, is how we understand these demands and how we respond to them. Says a lot about us because we are always who we are wherever we are, and it manifests in different ways. So thank you. I'm looking forward to learning from you as well. We're going to go to Numan.
My name is Numan. I am currently based in Chicago, Illinois, but en route to which I'm en route from South Jersey, Philadelphia area. I am in the trail end of the first year of the MDiv program in Islamic chaplaincy, which interestingly I'm here via Sister Kameelah. Actually, I was at Drexel University, and I was an undergrad there, and I actually had spoken to her several years ago about the future of psychology and chaplaincy and all these kind of things. And after graduating, it took me a few years, but I ended up in the program. My interests are community building and community well-being, especially from a pastoral spiritual aspect. I've always been interested in university chaplaincy, but as I've been more involved with my community, I'm finding an increased need in chaplain type figures and leaders in the masjids and the Muslim organizations. So for me, the interest in self-care and self-development comes from, bridging the gap between traditional spirituality and modern contemporary clinical studies. The self is essentially the window through which we interact with the outer world, right? It's the bridge between the inner and the outer. So all the work that we do is critically involved with the self. So the more we can care for ourselves, the better we can care for ourselves. The more we develop ourselves, the better we can do so with others. And so I look forward to learning from others' experiences and advice.
Okay, thank you. And I do remember speaking with you those many years ago, and was pleasantly surprised to see your name on the roster. So hopefully, inshallah, this will be beneficial on your journey. I'm going to go to, let's see, Tanya Lopez.
Yes, I took off my video just because my daughters are coming in and out of the office. I apologize.
No worries.
And I too was a little bit late to the call. I think I just must have had my dates confused, and my husband just flew out to a conference for the UCC denomination. So I was just a little discombobulated, but I'm glad to be here. I am a second-year MDiv student with Claremont School of Theology. I am a mom to 2 young girls, and the unique kind of characteristic of our family is that a lot of us are clergy. So I married a senior, like the oldest pastor's kid. That was not my plan when I was at church, but it kind of just organically happened. So his parents are ministers. My husband is an ordained minister within the Christian Church Disciples of Christ. My brother-in-law is ordained. My sister-in-law is ordained. I actually come from an education background. I have a BA in psychology and early childhood education. I have a minor in that. And I taught preschool for several years. And so I've always kind of done a lot of family ministry, a lot of working with young children. And I just organically felt a call to minister to families. And that's kind of been my journey with the program. I always have felt that I have been called pastor to support and to be of service to families and to people in general. When I saw that this course was available as an elective, and I had to double check with my advisor, I was like, can I get credit? Because I really want to take this class. She said, of course. I have seen that not just with pastors, but I think with any spiritual or giving profession, spiritual care is, I think, so essential and yet so often hard to maintain or difficult to make the time for, myself included. And so I just knew that I had to take this class. Last semester, we took a class on spiritual care and counseling, which is part of our MDiv program. And I knew that this was the next step that I wanted to take. I wanted to take a class on self-development and self-care because I said it's more than just the theoretical applications of what works with working with people, but how do you do the work within yourself so that you can tap into that and give to others. So I'm so excited to start this journey with all of you. And anxiously excited about what I might learn about myself. I've kind of been going through a journey. I've been going to counseling and working on some of my own, just to my own health to get balanced. And I think this is coming at a perfect time. I feel like it's really a God moment for me. So I can't wait to invest a little in myself so that I can give it back to others in the work that I hope to do. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm really excited about what you all are bringing to this work and what it means in terms of like self-reflection. And it is, I'll speak a little bit more about this, but I see all of you as very courageous because deciding to intentionally focus on your needs and what you contribute to the work, how you take care of yourself, can be very daunting, right? I think we like to talk about self-care, but often in ways that's like, oh yeah, I'll go to brunch and I'll I'll take maybe a day off and have like a mental health day. But those are sort of events and not a practice. And so when we think about really the kind of intention and dedication that we have to have to ourselves, sometimes can feel very counterintuitive because we think of ourselves as people like givers to others and sometimes don't keep that energy for ourselves. And so when we decide that now is the time that we want to do some kind of inward kind of soul work, it sounds good. And then we get closer to it, we're like, you know what? I'm not sure. So thank you for at least kind of raising that as some of the anxiety about what that might bring. So I'm going to go to Julie. Can introduce yourself.
Hi, can you hear me? Okay, great. So my name is Julie Davis, and I'm a second year, I just finished my second year in the Interfaith Chaplaincy program at CST, and I am talking to you from my home in Highland Park, which is near Pasadena, which is just west of Claremont. And let's see, I was a teacher for 17 years. I was an English teacher in college and high school, and spent most of my time in a high school teaching like 17 and 18-year-olds. And I'm looking forward in my next career to dealing with people who are older than that and who are expected, to be responsible for their own actions, I guess. And you can probably hear in that a little bit of why I might be taking a class on self-care, because I completely burned out as a teacher. There was not a word about self-care in my time as a teacher. And the more I read some of the things in the books that we've been assigned, and teachers are on the list of caregiving professions, and I feel like I gave and I gave and I gave, and for a while there was an energy that I got back, but it wasn't sustainable. I didn't have sustainable practices or a sustainable work environment. And so I've been going through I would say almost a 10-year process now of making a turn in my life, in my profession, but it's deeper than that, looking at the kind of person that I want to be. As a teacher, I didn't feel like there was a difference between who I was and what I did. And then when my passions changed and I was burned out, there was that gulf between who I was and what I did. And I want to try to bring those two things back together, so that work doesn't feel like work. It feels like an expression of who I am. But I know that to bring those two things together in a healthy way, I have to both find a new passion for for my work and for my talents, but also find a way of sustaining my energy and frankly, my sense of worth outside of what I do, between 8 to 5, or it's never 8 to 5, right? But you get what I mean. So that's one of the reasons I'm here. I think one area that I'm really, really kind of keen on is that I think has to do with self-care, is that we get into a routine, the routine of our work, of our profession, and we have tasks that we do, and we get immersed in the detail and the tasks, and that I think every one of us needs to have those moments where we zoom out and reflect on what Emerson would call the ideal worth of what we do, and think about what we're contributing to the world. So that just occurs to me as something that's really important to do when we are immersed in our professional lives, and they start to feel less meaningful simply because we haven't taken a moment to sit down and think about how they are meaningful. So happy to be here. Nice to meet all of you.
Thank you for that. I would definitely include teachers. And I think in some ways we are all educators, but when you're tasked with the responsibility of especially 17 to 18-year-olds, and you've been doing that for 17 years, again, I think it takes some courage, right? To say I've sort of hit my limitation, and I need to reevaluate what I am committed to. So I'm happy to know that we're going to be a part of your journey in doing that reevaluation. I'm going to go over to Haj Muhammad Ali.
Hello, everyone. How are you all? So I am Muhammad Ali. I am actually just moved to Lewisburg, Pennsylvania over this past weekend. For the past 5 years, 5+ years, I've been working as a chaplain in California State Prison. And I just moved to a new position as Muslim chaplain at Bucknell University here in Pennsylvania. So my start date is Monday. So I'm trying to unpack and get my family settled as much as possible between now and then, which is proving to be quite a task. I didn't realize how much stuff we have accumulated that we have to straighten out and organize. But otherwise, I've been at this for some time now, and looking forward to how I'm going to take care of myself in this new role. Prison was a little different because you were in quite an isolated environment, and of course, inmates can't reach you once you go home and ask you questions. And also now a different environment where students can, they can still reach me. They can still, find me. My house is right next to campus, so they'll know where I live. So I'm just kind of exploring internally and externally how I'm going to manage boundaries in general, and how I'm going to take care of myself. I do have small kids who generally kind of make that easy because they don't let you think about anything else once you walk in the door other than them. So I'm looking forward to this class and learning from others, and sharing what I've learned over the years.
Fantastic. Congratulations on the new position and the move, as difficult as it might be. I did serve as the Muslim chaplain at the University of Pennsylvania for 3 years. And still serve as an advisor to Penn Sapelo, which is the first Black Muslim student organization on campus. And so I think that's a great observation, is around how do you maintain boundaries, because that is also good and meaningful in terms of how you show up for others. So congratulations on that. I'm going to go up to Fong. Sam?
Hi everyone, my name is Fong. I am a first year MDiv student at University of the West for Buddhist chaplaincy. This class was made available and it was highly recommended that I take it. So I'm here now. Just part of the readings, I'm a little surprised by how much burnout is an issue. Not just in the spiritual world, but everywhere. I asked the head monk of the Sangha that I attend what he does to take care of himself. and the question, how I phrased it was, how do you motivate yourself to continue your practice without burning out? And his response just took me aback. He said that fear was his biggest factor, and that really surprised me. And just from the readings, I realized that is one of the biggest reasons for burnout. So that it's something that I want to look into more, given that I'm wondering if that is just a really big issue in Buddhism, and it's just swept under the rug. And seems like this class has come about at a time when it's relevant in my life. So as Professor Rashad said, there is no coincidences. And I'm very happy to be here. Thank you, y'all. I'm looking forward to learning about everyone and learning from everyone.
Thank you. And what I'd like to do, and kind of just sort of putting a bookmark there, is actually being able to look at the syllabus and including work around burnout and self-care, because it might be different language might be used in different practices. And so I'm constantly searching for information from other spiritual traditions that talk about this idea of the self. In Islam, it's the nafs. And so how we take care of ourselves in community, however we define community and contribute to that. And so I'll want to make time for us to also talk about how we might begin to kind of collaboratively think about a practice of self-care and a conversation about self-care that pulls from all of our traditions. It just so happens that for me, and I felt that it was very applicable, a lot of the sort of the published literature, especially research, has been on Christianity when it comes to this topic. And so I'm always open to including other traditions. One that I was particularly excited to kind of discover was the 10 symptoms of emotionally unhealthy spirituality. And when I found it, I was like, oh my gosh, one, you don't know me. So, but just realizing that I think across traditions that it is something I think that's unspoken, because if you feel called to a certain type of ministry, then expectation is around selflessness and, kind of just bottomless generosity. And so if someone is like, I'm not feeling like I hit the bottom, then we're not taught how to have that conversation. So thank you for joining this class. And absolutely, there are no coincidences. Last but not least, your name is not coming up. I know your name is not Galaxy, but your name is not coming up on mine. And so if you would introduce yourself and share a little bit about your background.
My name is Rustan Mujahideen, Los Angeles, California. I serve as assistant imam here at Masjid Bilal Islamic Center. And I've just been doing a lot of reflecting lately. A lot of imams, they have been doing the work as an imam for over 20 years, and they're all dying. You know, we had maybe 3 or 4 imams that have died, you know, this year, and some, you know, I was pretty close to them, so just got to start reflecting on my, you know, my personal care, and just watching what they've been through. I see them go from being very healthy to being very sick. So I'm just kind of reflecting on my own health, my own self-care. And in addition to that, I have a 6-year-old daughter, and I want to be around for her. I want to be around for her to send her to college and see her get married and have children and get on with her life. So I want to just make sure I take care of myself. And whatever I learned from this class, maybe I can share it, you know, with my with other imams and other people that, you know, that will come to me for assistance. So I'm in starting my third year of my MDiv at Claremont Bayan on a scholarship with Muhammad Ali. So I'm looking forward to being part of this class and engaging with my fellow students.
Great, thank you. And I'm glad that was something that you were able to name, is how we have conversations around self-care related to mortality. And that, you know, once we acknowledge our limitations and perhaps the way that we've been neglecting ourselves, then it's a sobering moment, right? And so I think this is, you know, my hope is that this class sort of starts a conversation that is ongoing, and that based on some of the activities that I have planned in the readings, that it really becomes, like I said, a practice, so to speak. And so that we don't wait until the minute that you say to yourself, I'm burned out, you're already past the point of crisis, right? Because now your body, your mind, your soul is saying like, listen, I'm not moving not one more step. And so when we get to that point, we've probably over time ignored some of the smaller signs that we were headed down in that direction. And so hopefully the conversations in this class are really designed for us to pay more attention to ourselves. And again, I think that is, for some of us, very difficult to do because we've associated sort of ministry, leadership, advising with being accessible all the time, right? And almost priding ourselves on our ability to kind of give in a very limitless way. And unfortunately, it's often to the detriment of not only to ourselves, but to the people that we serve. So thank you all for, you know, introducing yourselves and kind of stepping into this space. What I'd like to do now, we're at about 6:45. So again, I want to be conscious of time, is to do sort of a brief overview of the class and the syllabus, and then open it up to any questions that you might have. One of the, I guess the caveats that I want to be very explicit about in terms of how I work and I teach is from a very relational, cultural kind of perspective. And so for me, Tanya, you mentioned like I have 2 little girls and they kind of come in and they're like, Mommy, who are you talking to? Or if you're late or if you're moving and you're kind of adjusting, that I'm okay with that. I want you all to be full human beings in this class and this discussion. And so what I've learned and kind of embraced about myself and my understanding of who I am as an African-American Muslim woman is that I appreciate that we have to introduce a level of flexibility and understanding and how we approach how we are with people. And so there were some questions, I sent out an email to answer the questions around, you know, what actually constitutes this reading or this assignment, and, you know, what should be completed. And So I'll say it this way, because I also appreciate kind of a dialectic, right? Like there are readings and assignments that have been posted, and we have a schedule. But I've also appreciated being able to build in a level of grace and flexibility, understanding, and how we approach those tasks. And sometimes I know for me, the stress that we feel in approaching anything that has to get done is thinking about expectations we have of ourselves and others, perhaps disappointments, fear of failing, fear of, am I competent? Am I doing this well enough? And so I just want to acknowledge that life continues to happen all the time. And so it is sort of our responsibility to each other to think about how we give and receive grace to one another, while we're mindful of, the different demands that we all have. So like I said, the course readings, there are other sort of required readings and articles, and I can fully acknowledge that given sort of the variability in all of our lives, you may not have all of that completed on July 7th, right? And that for me is not like a point of failure, right? It's our lives are complicated and demand of us at different times to adjust. And so I'm hoping that I can create a space where we can do those adjustments together, and that no one will feel penalized or as if they're not kind of keeping up with the class. And so, that being said, I think the discussions are definitely enriched when we've all been able to kind of look over the material. And things may happen and that might not be the case. And so we'll constantly kind of just make allowances for the differences in our lives and our backgrounds, so that we can continue to connect with each other around the process and not simply the content. So with that, I see that Chris just joined us. Welcome. What we've been doing is kind of brief introductions, a little bit about your background, what brings you to this class, and then I'll provide an overview of the syllabus. So I want to welcome you into the class and give you a few moments to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about why you're here.
Hello, Assalamu alaikum. Sorry I'm late. I'm traveling. I'm in Mexico and the internet down here is poor. So I apologize. I've been trying to get online. I'm entering my third and hopefully final year of my Master's of Divinity. So this is an elective I wanted to take like other students in the class. And I look forward to, I see a lot of people in the class that I've already met. So I look forward to seeing all them and meeting the new people.
Wonderful, welcome. And so as I was mentioning, that my background is in psychodynamic training and family systems, but also narrative and kind of relational cultural kind of approach. And so what I was saying was that I want to be able to open up space for us to kind of give and receive grace to one another as life continues to happen. So you're in Mexico. Wi-Fi is kind of spotty, and so you're joining us now, and so I'm grateful that you were able to kind of step into the space with us. And so with that, I want to kind of go over the syllabus, say a little bit more about the assignments that are listed there, and a little bit of sort of a rationale for why each sort of topic is included in the syllabus. There was a lot of content that we could have included, but I wanted to, one, ensure that the material would be both personally and professionally relevant, and that it kind of builds sequentially from day one to the final day. So as it says, the course is really designed for us to think about self-care and self-development while being a spiritual leader. But again, you may be in leadership roles that are informal, right? So it's not simply that you have a role where that is expected of you, but you might step into spaces where people are looking to you for different reasons to provide some kind of guidance or advising. And so when we are called to do that, I think there's a level of responsibility that we may all feel. And at times that level of responsibility may overshadow kind of our own personal needs and concerns. And so it's giving us an opportunity to look at our own process, self-assessment process for how we make those decisions about what we accept, what leadership roles we step into, whether they're formal or informal. And, you know, as I mentioned, we are who we are everywhere we are, right? And so there are times when we might kind of compartmentalize or say, you know, I feel very competent and capable and effective in my work life, but in my personal life, I don't feel quite as much. And so I might, you know, kind of draw some stark divisions between the two worlds, when in actuality, who we are that's unresolved shows up in our work in a variety of different ways. And so, you know, the outline of the syllabus is really designed for us to kind of take a look at ourselves and how we are, how we show up, the influences from our childhood and our families that contribute to the story of who we are. And then taking that self-awareness and self-reflection to think about our strengths and our limitations, thinking about our levels of emotional intelligence, and then being able to tie that to, I think, a deep dive for the overview of trauma part 1 and 2 is really designed for us to then be able to take a look at the ways that we have also absorbed, right, through our conversations with other people, through our families, you know, our loved ones, perhaps our congregations, how we have taken in vicariously the stories of others as well. And so one of the sort of insights that I really appreciated in my training in restorative practices was thinking about this idea of common shock, and that being related to the acknowledgement that there is violations or violence that's happening all around us in very different ways. And some of those ways we might be very aware of, and some of them are very subconscious. And so again, how we internalize those violations, those acts of violence, and almost like how we metabolize it, right? So there is a lot to take in. And at many times we don't sit and sort of say, how am I going to digest, right? If you've been in a role of a teacher or advisor or leader, imam, pastor, there might be people talking to you all day. And it's really, you know, building in a practice to say, okay, I've absorbed a lot of information, a lot of stories. How do I digest it? It was almost eye-opening for my husband when I told him that I currently work as a therapist at Temple University's Counseling Center. And he would kind of joke with me and he'd say, you know, sometimes when you come home, I can see that you're sort of sitting in the driveway for like 10 minutes. Like what's going on, right? And my kids have taken to like texting me like, Mommy, I see you in the car. I know you're home. What are we going to eat for dinner? And I had to tell him it really was, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes, just a moment for me to pause, right? And to kind of figure out how am I going to digest what my day has been so that I can show up for my family in a way that was more present. And so, you know, there are times when I can take the 10 to 15 minutes, other times where I don't have that transition time. And I feel the impact of that. And so that speaks to sort of the trauma stewardship, right? How we understand the care for ourselves. And related to kind of identity in the personal narrative, we really have to kind of take a look at what are our core beliefs about caring for ourselves, right? So depending on your background, how you were raised, this idea of I as an individual, I as the self, is sometimes hard to kind of really wrestle with. So what does it mean for me to think about myself? Is that selfish? Is that sort of turning away from the things that I am grateful for, the blessings that I do have? And so I'm really going to encourage us to think about how we might have to reframe those core beliefs that really serves as impediments to engaging in a practice of self-care, because at this point they might have become so subconscious and internalized that we don't realize that they're there. And so it raises issues around worthiness, around what do we deserve, what do we feel we need, and if that some of the conclusions are my self-worth is predicated on how much people need me, right? That can lead to burnout. If it's I am not deserving of care or should not even ask that of others, that also leads to burnout. So the first day or two is really going to be kind of turning the spotlight, turning the mirror on ourselves, again, which can be very hard to do, right? Because we're so accustomed to saying like, you know what, people need me, I'm there, I'm reliable, I'm dependable, I'm great, people can really come to me for support. You might be sort of the rock, the steady person for a lot of people. And then finding that when you're in that space of really needing a compassionate witness, right? Needing someone to help you along in your journey, that might feel very lonely because of the ways that you've sort of set up what is acceptable for you and for others. And so that, kind of leading us into a conversation around vicarious trauma, common shock, the cycle of trauma and violence, and then understanding how compassion fatigue, burnout has manifested in your life, and getting a sense of how you have tried to manage that. And I believe everyone sort of makes an effort, right, to manage it. Whether or not we're successful is a different story. But we all try to manage, and sometimes those strategies could be denial, right? Those strategies could be, I'm going to throw myself even more into my work so that I can sort of minimize or suppress those feelings of irritation, right? Of frustration with yourself and others. For me as a therapist, people often ask, how can you sit and listen to people's stories, right? And sort of their hardships, every single day. And when I'm feeling really great about where I am in my self-care, right? I'm able to say that I'm not just hearing stories of tragedy, but also stories of how people are coming to understand themselves in different ways. And for me, that's very inspiring. When I'm not as good on my self-care, right? It's scheduling, perhaps 5, 6, 7 clients, right, in one day, and really celebrating when somebody doesn't show up. Saying like, okay, this 2 hours I now have to myself. So those are usually some signs for me, right? That when I'm rejoicing that someone hasn't showed up, I'm like, oh, okay, now here's a moment where I need to kind of pause and say, okay, what's happening with me right now? And that might be an early sort of warning sign of burnout. And then in our sort of final phase of the class, it was important to me that we not only talk sort of like globally and theoretically around sort of these concepts, but that it culminated in coming up with a plan, right? What is based on the awareness that we now have of ourselves, what does that mean practically, right? Pragmatically, what are some of the strategies that we want to employ? Have we written them down, right? I think there's now sort of like a self-care industry that kind of markets to folks who want kind of something that feels very solution-based, right? Like, buy this and you will feel better, right? I mean, that's what capitalism gives you. And so really wanting to kind of interrogate that idea of purchasing something or kind of engaging in one event, which will sort of be the solve on some of the issues that we face on a continual basis. And so the development of the self-care plan is really an integration of what we've learned, what we've felt throughout the week, insights that have emerged, again, kind of being cognizant of how some of these conversations may unearth, right, things or experiences, memories that might be painful or difficult. And so it's important that we, again, build in some fluidity, some flexibility around how we might be impacted by the discussion as well. Any questions or comments on that?
I just had, I'm sorry, this is me and Matt. I just had one thought and one reflection when you shared how you sat in the driveway and your family is like, okay, she's home. And I had flashbacks on doing that. And, but those are such wonderful moments, just sitting in that car. The other thought, which I didn't recognize as a signal of burning out, is when someone does not show up and you celebrate. I've had that happen. And when they didn't come, I'd be like, good. But to think of it as a signal for burnout, I hadn't considered. And so I'm eager to get more of such insights so that I can identify, you know, I know that I already know I'm burned out though. I just can't identify the path. And I think that if I can identify some of the, you know, like Hansel and Gretel, those breadcrumbs, then I can be better about cleaning up or doing things to prevent myself from getting to a state of burnout and not knowing those small things that led me to it and not feeling guilty about not being able to meet the demands of the day. Because sometimes it's just the demands of the day and the expressions of others who really want to talk to you and you just can't say no. You want to say no and you're thinking, don't you see I'm tired? Don't you see me dragging my leg? But you can't say no and they don't want you to say no. It's like how to negotiate that, the self-care and the normal routine of the day, and then the self-care that you create so that you can enliven and restore yourself. So thank you for the points that you shared.
Absolutely. Any other comments or thoughts that might have come up? Okay. So I want to just explain a bit about the assignments. So the first reflection paper, again, as I explained in my email, is either your thoughts about perhaps maybe there was one particular reading that resonated really strongly with you, and you sort of want to, I almost think of it almost like as a talk back, right? And being able to say, you know, I hadn't thought about this before, this is new information, or it really resonates with some of the thinking that I've been doing in this area. So that first reflection paper is a way, I mean, and I'm not expecting perfection, right? I'm expecting for you all to really think about whether it's the readings in total, one particular article or passage from a book that has really gotten you to think, right, about how you apply that to yourself. And that is due the Friday, July 5th, I'm sorry. The expressive writing assignment, as I indicated, expressive writing is actually a therapeutic tool. Some of you may be familiar, which can be very beneficial. Again, the expectation is about 20 minutes of distraction-free, kind of like a free association. You'll get writing prompts. And so that is really designed, again, as a way to help you digest, right, what we may have discussed during the class. It could be on a completely different topic that has come to you, but you'll get those prompts at the end of the class each day. And then that assignment is sort of a culmination of what you may have written or reflected about over the course of the week. And then the second reflection paper is called The Shape of Your Daily Life. And I think, Namet, you kind of touched on this. Again, it's like a very practical way of us being able to say, okay, this is what I say I want to do. This is my intention. How does that compare with what I'm actually doing? And so it's going to be really a way for us to think about what are those moments in our lives that actually detract from the intention that we have set for each other or for ourselves. So Namet, you mentioned, when people expect you to be there, but they don't really see that you're tired, they're not picking up on some of the very subtle nonverbal cues that you're trying to throw their way. That often leads to resentment, right? And so even though we're saying, okay, I have to be here, I have to listen, I have to provide support, there is a part of ourselves that feels very resentful and burdened by the expectation of being accessible and being present for others. And so the shape of your daily life activity, it's similar to if we're ever on sort of like a thinking about kind of healthy lifestyle and we want to eat better, we want to do more exercise. And, often people say like, well, do you write down what you actually eat? And so when you become more intentional about what you're consuming, then you can say, oh, right, like I'm trying to manage this, but I'm noticing that when I'm really stressed, I reach for carbs, I reach for sugar, I reach for those things, which is actually detrimental, right, to my stated goal, which is to be healthy. And so this is sort of a way for us to begin to kind of track our time, how we're spending it. And then the final paper is a spiritual autobiography, and that will include a self-care plan and literally a plan that you would create for yourself and perhaps share with the people who are closest to you, so that at times, if you are not aware of the signs that you're burning out, the people close to you can say, hey, wait a second. You've identified this as a signal and I'm noticing it and I want to bring it to your attention. And so we're going to, again, kind of incorporate a lot of the discussions in that final paper. The reason that I don't provide sort of like a description and requirements and this is what it should look like in the syllabus is because I find that one, it can be overwhelming if folks begin to sort of map out what that final paper or those reflection papers or those assignments look like from day one. It sort of, I think, doesn't integrate sort of the process of awareness. And so on the one hand, I acknowledge like not having sort of like the full details of those requirements can be anxiety provoking for some. My sort of process is to, one, to kind of sit with the anxiety and think about where it's coming from, and to figure out how we can manage it better, kind of given the content of the class, which may be overwhelming for different reasons at different times. So I want to sort of acknowledge that not including that was not an oversight. but that it is really meant for us to, again, kind of slow down, right? And say, if I knew exactly what each requirement entailed, one, would I try to do it early so I can kind of get it out the way? Chris is shaking his head. Would I, just say, okay, well, that's only 2 pages. Okay, I'll just do it, the night before so that I don't have to, right? And so, again, we're thinking about time. How do we manage ourselves, our expectations? How are we caring for ourselves when we have multiple sort of competing demands? And one of the sort of the advice and sort of the lessons that I've learned along the way from people who have been gracious enough to kind of sit with me and be patient with me is to think about the expectations that I bring to every endeavor. And for me, that has been really wrestling with what it means for how perfectionism shows up in my work, in my personal life, and how that can serve as a barrier to self-care as well. And so it's taken sort of kind of being able to sit with ambiguity, being able to sit with discomfort, really be curious about it, and then make allowances, again, like I said, for life that continues to happen, right, all the time around us. So any questions specifically about the syllabus, and then we can open it up just for any questions or thoughts that you might have. Yes, Celia?
Hi, Professor. I appreciated what you say. Let's just sit in anxiety. Well, some day is good to sit, some day is not. Especially, I haven't been back in graduate school for forever. So this is my 3rd master's degree, but I don't remember how I did it before. So the question has to do with, I love free write. Okay, I can write all kind of thoughts and organize it all kind of way, but there's still in a, in an academic world, there's still some kind of, professor has a requirement saying, so my question for you is at some point, I would like to know, do you have a rubric? And when you see a paper, you say, this paper has to meet a certain kind of standard. I'm not asking to say, answer these questions. Some professors like that, but you may not want to do that. But when you write a paper, because in my last semester, my professor said, hey, you need to be more scholarly. I said, okay, but I would know how to do citation, blah, blah, blah. But so then it deviates from what's going on inside of me. And so I don't know this particular class, you're more interested in what's impacting us because it is about self-care, or you're more interested in how many citations that we made because we have so many readings to do. So
thank you for that question. So the short answer is no, I'm not interested in how many citations. So like I said, it could be there's one particular passage from one reading that really just, you kind of perked up, you said, oh my gosh, this helps me make connections between A and C and Z. And that could be what you talk about. So I'm given that, I'm expecting that you've done one reading, right? At least, right? We're talking about requirements. So one reading that feels meaningful to you. This is why I didn't say, of reading 1 to 11, pick 4 of those or 3 of those. So in writing that reflection, like I said, it could be 1 paragraph or 1 reading. It could be you read 3 of the articles and this is sort of the theme that stood out to you. I think, Fong, you mentioned just how prevalent burnout, right, is, and that thread through the reading. That might be something that you reflect on. And as far as a rubric, I can, sort of sketch one out, but I didn't want to, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. is that one, I realized for some, it can be really daunting or overwhelming to think like, am I being graded on grammar, on sort of my sentence structure, on, right? And I think that can diminish sort of like the expression of the thoughts and sort of the process that you're engaged in kind of emotionally and mentally as you read the material. So I'm not taking points off because, oh, that's not a complete sentence, right? I mean, it is a reflection, it's not a research paper. So I guess in terms of a rubric, I am reading for sort of a level of almost like personalization of the material, right? It's one thing to say, you know, here are the research findings, here are the limitations of a study, right? That's very academic. But when I'm asking you, how did it impact you? What did it make you think about? What did it make you feel? I can't sort of legislate that. And so I'm not looking for perfection. I'm not looking for, you know, 10 citations. I'm not looking for, you know, every sentence to be structured grammatically perfectly. But what I'm looking for, essentially, I would say, is your heart, right? How do you express that? How are you engaging the material? And it is usually, for me, pretty evident, right? When people are sort of pondering, and that's reflected in their writing. So I hope I answered your question.
I have a question of clarification.
Sure.
Regarding the reflection paper number 2, Shape Your Daily Life. Is
yes.
a writing that will be, I'm understanding it as a prompt that will occur every day that we are there, which will constitute 5 to 7 writings, or is it a daily writing that happens and it's due on August the 2nd, which means it'll be like a journal?
So the expressive writing assignment is the one that you'll receive daily prompts.
I'm sorry, yeah, the expressive writing assignment. So we should do that every day, beginning now?
No, so you'll get the first prompt on Sunday, July 7th.
Okay, on July 7th.
Yes.
And so every day we'll get a prompt, we should respond, and when the prompts discontinue, we should.
So the prompts are, it'll be a prompt and it requires sort of 20 minutes of distraction-free time. Mm-hmm. And so you'll get that prompt on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday.
Okay.
Right. And then so that next day will essentially be a synthesis of all of those 4 days.
Okay, so we'll get the prompt, we will have 20 minutes of non-distraction, we'll write it, but it won't, and then it'll be due before we leave?
Yes, and so let me add this too. I am not collecting those 20-minute prompts writing assignments that you're going to get each day, right? What I'm collecting is your reflection about the process, right, of completing that assignment, of the insights that you think were important that you were able to gain through the activity. And again, I believe that's about 3 pages. So because the prompt may bring up memories or experiences that are deeply personal. And so I'm not, it can, for some, it can feel kind of like a journal entry, different things that you may not want to share. So I'm not collecting those prompts. What I am expecting you to submit is a reflection on that process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? We have about 5 minutes left. Okay. One of the last things that I do want to kind of highlight again is that there's research studies here, there are books that are included on the syllabus, but again, what I found is that the material can be difficult at different times because we're talking about, or even thinking about, the traumas the violations, the violence that we've encountered in our own personal lives, or that we have been witness to. And it's painful, it's hard, it's difficult, it's challenging. And I am very much aware of how that might show up. And so in our time together, I want it to be interactive. We build in breaks, and those breaks could be just like, let's do some deep breathing, some grounding, just kind of sit with some silence for a few minutes. And again, kind of practicing how we digest, right, really difficult material and care for ourselves in the process. And so this is, I think, a course that's different from other courses that you might have taken, because other courses might sort of tap into your intellectual self and really emphasize the learning. And this course is really asking you to be your whole self, and that includes sort of the personal, the private, right, your hidden self. And that's a different challenge, right? And so I want to honor that and let you know that the sort of the space in which we have these conversations is sensitive to that, and we build in time for us to kind of pause. So yes, Celia.
So I got one more questions about the design of the workshop. Is it going to be experiential? I mean, it's not just interactive. Means experiential means you got to put us in exercises and so we can have an experience, or how's that work?
So experiential, I mean, there's some didactic, right? I'm teaching some material, but that also includes time for you to talk with each other, right, in smaller groups. It's activities that are planned so that we can kind of move from just, sort of intellectual to kind of emotional and relational. And so we have 5 hours together. That's a lot of time together. And so, it's the activities that I have planned are what my students told me last summer was that it felt like the 5 hours really went by quickly. And, we're all going to feel fatigue at some point. Again, we have to show each other grace, right? So some of the fatigue may actually also be psychological, right? That we're talking about things and sort of our body's way of caring for ourselves. Like, I'm just so tired. I can't, right? But some things might be coming up for us. And so I have shaped each day so that it builds in the pause for us to learn from each other, to process the information with one another. And then again, like a practice of self-care in the moment, right? How can we practice some grounding? With that, we are at 7:28 my time. Please feel free to email me with any questions that might come up, something, you may think about later. But I have to say, I'm also an adult learner, that I have 3 children, 16, 14, and 3. I have 6 stepchildren ranging in age from 32 to 11. I'm finishing my, baby. I'm finishing right now my dissertation. I'm writing my last chapter. And so I'm saying all that to say that life happens. And so we're all, either you're coming back after a 3rd master's, or, this is kind of a career shift, this is new. But there is flexibility built in. It's not, self-care shouldn't be a hardship. And so I want this to be a process of learning that feels beneficial and meaningful. And so I encourage us to just make sure that we can pay attention to process and content, right? So there's a process of our learning, and then there's the content and there's tasks that we have to complete, but there's flexibility built in. Okay. So it was really nice to see all your lovely faces. I'm looking forward to the 7th and to the week that we have together. If you're traveling, please travel safely. And again, if there's any questions, feel free to email me, and I look forward to meeting you all in person. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, peace. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, upon you. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you.
Hey, Chris, what are you doing in Mexico? Oh, he's gone.
There he goes.
Like a resort. All right, guys, have a good night.
Thank you. You too.
Sheikh Mohammed.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.